One of the teams that we were really excited to see in the playoffs were the Timberwolves. They had a really good season. They were consistent all season, consistently at the top of the Western Conference. And obviously, a lot of people really like to see Anthony Edwards play. He's a rising star, really get into that superstar range a little bit, possibly. But a lot of people have wanted to see him play. They came out and really dominated the Suns in that game one. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. So, what were the reasons why the Timberwolves came out in such a dominating fashion against the Suns?
Well, one, we're seeing a young star, Anthony Edwards, really ascend and take his next steps, which I think will be dependent on his results in the playoffs, because I think this is where we really get to learn who players are. And I think that's one of the most exciting things when I watch him. Like, he's still producing at a pretty high level. We're seeing him take a lot of steps towards being a more seasoned veteran, more than when we saw him his first time in the playoffs against like the Grizzlies. We're seeing him really take that next step and really owning being the franchise player. So I think he's one of the reasons. But to be a little bit more talking the strategic side, I think that they just in a way have the Suns number in a way where I think they match up very well. They have a pretty good amount of long, lanky, athletic wings. When you think about Jaden McDaniels, who's one of the best perimeter defenders in the game that we've seen, I personally thought that he would be given the assignment of Kevin Durant, but he guarded Devin Booker a lot, which I think really bothered him, and him getting to his spots and being able to be comfortable raising up, because we know Devin's a guy that can shoot over defenders. But when you put a longer, more lanky defender like a Jaden McDaniels on him, then I think he has a chance to bother the shot at the top. Usually when shooters get to the top of their release, it's harder to really mess with their shot. And a lot of times, especially if you're smaller than the offensive player, when you're guarding them, you have to do your work early and disrupt the beginning of the shot at the bottom, making them do more unusual footwork or swiping at the ball, making them feel like they have to bring it up to the top of their shot in an awkward way. But I think McDaniels having that height advantage and length advantage still has an ability to alter Devin Booker when he gets to the top of his shot. It kind of reminded me of how teams chose to defend the Warriors when Kevin Durant was there. They kind of allowed KD to do his thing. We know that he likes to operate more in the mid range. And I think they felt like they had a better chance of disrupting Booker's rhythm rather than disrupting a Kevin Durant's rhythm. I think with KD, you want to be more physical. And I think that's why they didn't mind putting like an Anthony Edwards on him a pretty decent amount, because Anthony Edwards isn't a slouch himself on defense. He's actually very good. And we know that he has more of a lower base advantage compared to Kevin Durant. So they didn't focus on stopping him as much as they did focus on trying to disrupt Booker's rhythm. And I think when you get to Booker and Bradley Beal, I think you have a better chance when you're guarding them than if you were to allow Booker to get comfortable, because Kevin Durant's more likely to get to his spots and get to his shots anyways with the defender such as the magnitude of Jaden McDaniels. So I think that was a good strategy on there, and I think it helped them get that game one victory.
Basically, what you just described, it played into the weaknesses of the Suns because the Suns are at their best when they are moving the basketball, taking advantage of closeout situations, forcing the defense to rotate and help, and kicking out to open shooters or kicking out to Devin Booker or Bradley Beal to for them to get a favorable situation with a defender closing out with at them. So that makes them in more control of the situation. They can drive by the defender, they can catch and shoot it or pump fake, get around the defender. They have more control in that specific situation. And also, they play better when they get a lot more assists. So, if you're in that drive and kick situation, you get more assists. You're moving the basketball more. You're taking advantage of the defense having to rotate and close out. But when they are not as efficient, is when they fall into more one-on-one basketball where you're depending solely on Devin Booker having to create his own shot or Kevin Durant having to create his own shot or Bradley Beal having to create his own shot and not getting the defense to rotate. So that was the plan of the Timberwolves. They wanted to kind of bait the Suns into playing one on one and not moving the basketball as much. And that plays into what you just described. They put longer, lankier defenders on Devin Booker and Brad Bill and forced them to have to take tougher shots over those more elite defenders. And over time, we all know Devin Booker, Bradley Bill, and Kevin Durant, they can do that, right? But it's just a tougher shot. And over the course of a series, over the course of a game, it's just going to be tough to do that consistently and have your team win games based off of that. And that plays into what we've always talked about with the Timberwolves. They are the number one defense in the NBA. And in the half court, especially on offense for the Timberwolves, they are not the best. So what they do is they get in transition, they get stops on defense, and that leads to offense, and that's how they get going. So it was a lot of one-on-one basketball for the Suns, and Kevin Durant had a really good game. He had a more favorable matchup with Cat on him initially. Karl Anthony Towns guarded him initially, so he was able to get in a really good rhythm. But Devin Booker kind of struggled a little bit. Bradley Beal didn't get a whole bunch of shots up. Bradley Beal had 15 points. Devin Booker had 18. That's just not going to cut it for them to succeed, especially when a lot of their team is built around those three guys, right? So the Suns really played into the game plan that the Timberwolves had for them. And in order for the Suns to play better and have a chance in this series, they have to do a better job of moving the basketball, taking advantage of closeouts, and forcing the defense to rotate.
Yeah, and to go to your point as well about them being able to do that drive and kick type of thing, I think that's what makes the Celtics great. They have the guys that can penetrate into the paint and then draw the attention to kick out. And the thing that you highlighted, which I think plays into the Timberwolves' advantage, is if you're unable to do that, guess who's able to stay closer to the rim? Rudy
Rudy
Gobert.
Gobert.
And that's been the thing about him in the playoffs is when teams are able to get him to have to close out, step away from the basket, that's when he's least effective because we know he's not known for his offense. We know that his rim protection is very important. And I think just the size of those two between Towns and Gobert, like you mentioned, like if you can keep them around the basket, that's going to help them a lot. That's going to help them get secure those rebounds. That's going to help them get the outlet passes out a lot cleaner. That's going to help Anthony Edwards to get into transition because we saw that he was pretty hot from three last night. He was talking to Kevin Durant, really confident. We know what he can do athletically, and then you add in guys like Nikhil Alexander Walker, who had a really productive game. Mike Conley is a vet, and you just go down the line. And the Timberwolves are very scary when they can get into that kind of rhythm and confidence,
Yeah.
especially at home, because the Timberwolves, when they're at home, they have a very good crowd. So I think the Suns are going to have to do a better job in freeing up a Devin Booker and allowing him to work more off ball rather than with the ball in his hands to how they might be a lot more accustomed to because it's going to be very difficult for him to maneuver around the Jaden McDaniels and Bradley Beal, although he can score, just his fit on the team this year, not playing as many games as they would have hoped. He hasn't really been in that second role. His role is more so the third option offensively. And when Booker's not going, it's very tough because last year Booker probably went on one of the craziest stretches offensively that we've
Yep.
seen in the playoffs. And that's probably the reason they were able to get two games against the Nuggets last year. So without that, the Suns are a very different team. I feel like they did a good job on putting a lot more spot up shooters, 3-and-D guys around them. Grayson Allen, one of the top 3-point shooters in the league. Royce O'Neal is a pretty good two-way player, can stretch the floor, but without that ability to drive and kick, it kind of nullifies what they can do, and it just makes it tough on them. We know the Suns are already pretty thin on the big man depth. You have Nurkic, and then you're looking at guys like Bol, who in the playoffs isn't really going to see too much time on the floor. So they're going to have to figure it out offensively because this is their way to win is on the offensive end.